Well, good evening. I'm Dave Jones, meteorologist with Storm Center Communications and also GeoCollaborate. We're doing these video updates for the Fleet Response Working Group, the sensitive information sharing environment that helps to coordinate the movement of fleet utility vehicles across the country in times of disaster so they can get through states without delay and get right into the disaster areas to start working on damage assessment and then responding to power outages. So I'm going to start with a 5 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. It just came out, and Hurricane Henri maintains 75 mile per hour winds. Higher gusts, 85 to 90 mile per hour wind gusts, but it does look like the internal structure is getting some more thunderstorms wrapped around it. It's not intensifying rapidly, and soon it's going to run out of very warm Atlantic waters. Once it crosses over the Gulf Stream, then temperatures really dive down into the mid to low 70s before the Connecticut coastline, and that should help to ease some of the intensification. It should really hinder it, actually, but it has so much momentum, it's really not going to make a whole lot of difference in the overall strength. So there you see the satellite picture. Let me bring it a little bit closer so you can see what's going on. This obviously is Henri spinning. This is the GOES satellite image showing the visible satellite sector. And what's going on is there's a little low pressure system that's cut off from the jet stream over the Appalachian Mountains. And then there's a big high pressure system off the coast. That is acting to steer and move Henri towards the coastline of Connecticut. And with GeoCollaborate, we have the updated track for you. So this is what it looks like. Henri, one thing I want you to notice about it is that the wind field is starting to expand. This happens when storms get into higher latitudes, but also because the storm is getting a little bit more organized and the winds are fanning out. So that means it's got going to have a much larger impact when it makes landfall. Notice this. This is pretty wide here, and then look at Connecticut. It's not as wide as the wind field is for tropical storm force winds. I also want you to notice that the tropical storm force winds extend well beyond this cone. Look at that. For those of you who think that the cone is a representative of potential damage, that is incorrect. The cone is only signifying the likelihood of where the center of the storm is going to move within 65 miles. So it could slightly move outside of the cone. It could slightly move outside of the cone to the right. But once it gets out here, it could move out this way. You really shouldn't pay attention to the center of the cone. The storm could move anywhere within that cone. But take a look at this. By 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, it's making a turn. And by 8 o'clock, or 2 p.m., 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, the storm is making landfall. So you're basically running out of time in the Northeast to prepare for this storm, particularly if you're in eastern Long Island, if you're in Connecticut, if you're in Rhode Island. That's going to be on the eastern edge of the storm. So you're going to see potentially quite a bit of storm surge, 3 to 5 feet. Perhaps in Rhode Island and also the southern parts of Massachusetts. So we're going to get a little bit closer in here, and I'll show you some of the impacts from storm surge that are predicted by the National Hurricane Center. We'll get in here a little bit closer as well. So this blue area down here on the New Jersey coastline, that is 1 to 3 feet of potential storm surge as Henri moves on up the coast and makes a left-hand turn. So it's going to be throwing out lots of wind, and it's going to be throwing out wave action. And at high tide, you could see some minor beach erosion, of course. And then as you get up into parts of southern Long Island, we're talking here about tidal surges of 2 to 4 feet in this area. I color-coded it in the yellow, so this is 2 to 4 feet in this area. We'll get a little bit closer so you can see in Long Island what I'm talking about. In the middle and northern part of Long Island, so Hampton Bays, Suffolk, all the areas up here, you're going to see a potential storm surge of 3 to 5 feet. 3 to 5 feet, that's above normal dry ground. So if you take a high tide and you follow it to how high it gets, beyond that is dry, normally dry ground. It's going to be 3 to 5 feet above that. That's the prediction. And I'm going to back out here just a little bit to go towards Cape Cod and see what we have here. So we also have 3 to 5 feet of potential storm surge here on going out on Cape Cod too, particularly the southern part of Cape Cod, and within Cape Cod, the northern part, 2 to 4 feet of potential storm surge. And then up along the coast of Massachusetts, we're looking at 1 to 3 feet of storm surge possibility as Henri makes its landfall. Keep in mind, it's a very big circulation. So as the storm really comes in, you're going to be seeing winds way out here coming in towards the coastline of Massachusetts. We're not talking about just a little minimal storm that's that big. This is just the symbol. No, the storm is going to be much bigger than that. So I want to give you a couple of Governor of Connecticut just finished a press conference, and we edited together some of that information for those of you who live in Connecticut or are involved in business in Connecticut. And I want you to see what the governor has to say. It's about 5.5 minutes long, but it's got some very good information in it. So here's the governor of Connecticut.
Category 1 hurricane that's going to be hitting the state of Connecticut directly and the region more broadly, starting first thing tomorrow morning. It's called Hurricane Henri, Category 1. I don't think the name Henri or Category 1 do justice to the severity of what this storm could represent. Brenda just reminded me that Superstorm Sandy was not even a Category 1 hurricane, and look what that exacted on our state and our region. This is particularly severe because it's going to be 8+ inches of rainfall on top of tons of rainfall that we've had over the last week. And that means our ground is saturated. That means our ground sitting on top of non-porous ledge is like a sponge, and there's no more absorbent, and that leads to flooding. Saturation of the soil combined with the fact that we could have 70, 80 mile-an-hour winds, that makes the trees a lot less secure. They go over, power goes out, and Eversource and UI have warned us that there could be hundreds of thousands of outages over the next few days and beyond. I don't think Connecticut has ever been as well prepared for a storm as we are for Hurricane Henri. We're working very closely, as you can imagine, with our utilities in particular, Eversource, United Illuminating, and they're assuring us that they're going to have twice as many people on the ground pre-positioned as we had a year ago. That makes a big difference. And we're going to be able to respond faster and respond in a way that does everything we can to keep you safe. The other thing we've worked on very closely with the utilities as well as the telecom companies, and if you go back here at the Emergency Operations Center, the big round table with the boards in front, we've had all the commissioners, that's DOT, Transportation, DEEP. We've got General Yvonne representing the Guard. We've got 200 Guard who have been activated, doing everything we can to make sure the lines of communication are clear. I do not want any confusion in terms of what's going on out there. You'll be able to call at any time you want 211, our emergency line, or even better, go to the online 211.org and you'll be able to get the current information, what's happening. Look, I think we found out from ICEA the hard way that electricity is not a nice to have. Electricity is an absolutely essential service. We know what it means in terms of medicine. We know what it means in terms of food. We know what it means in terms of the fact that next week we could have 90-degree weather. Stay safe, stay home. Get yourself a little extra gasoline. Make sure you have your phones all charged. Make sure you have 3, 4, 5 days worth of food stored. Make sure you have the phone number of some people that maybe are living alone and need a little extra assurance, so you can reach out to them and care for them and make sure they're taken care of.
We looked at that.
We have. We've been working closely with the utilities, making sure that we've done a lot of tree trimming. We get some grief about that, by the way, but making sure that there are less trees vulnerable to crashing down, especially on the major distribution networks, the major electric distribution. So I think there's been progress there, and I hope you see that progress. Look, first and foremost, we assess the damage. Secondly, we have the tree teams, making sure that we can assess what wires are hot, which are not hot, so we can get those roads cleared as quickly as possible. We focused on those densest tree lines, like this guy was just asking, so that those densest distribution, so that activates the most number of houses and homes, and to get the electricity on for them fastest. But Brenda, you want to talk a little more about that?
Thank you, Governor. Yes, we're working very closely under our unified command with state agencies, working with municipalities. We have a number of task forces set up, including a transportation task force that includes the National Guard, Department of Correction, Department of Transportation, our agency, and others, to figure out if there's a need for either rescue or evacuation support for municipalities. We stand ready to help them. The state has a state urban search and rescue team, which has been activated by the governor and is preparing to be ready to be deployed if we need it for swift water rescue or for any other purpose. We continue to have, we work under what's called the state response framework, and we have emergency support functions, which is basically everybody working together to complete a mission. And so we have many, many different organizations, both public and sector and private sector, working together to help to answer any requests that come in from municipalities. And we work through a regional process where we have 5 regional coordinators, and all the requests can come in through them and then be posted here so that we can find the appropriate resource to help them.
We've had very close coordination with our federal partners. I just got off the phone, like I said, with President Biden. We have a regional FEMA representative. Anything you'd like to add that you can say in terms of the region?
Thank you, Governor. FEMA is here to support the governor and all the state of Connecticut's needs. We've actually been here for well over a year and a half now. We embed a liaison officer with the state's EOC, Justin Ratti, who helps us coordinate any and all needs, not just for the COVID disaster. I was here last year. I want to reiterate what the governor said. This is a hurricane, but even Tropical Storm Isaias last year took out 750,000 power to folks in the state of Connecticut. I was here for that disaster as well, helping the state with the needs there. We have the Army Corps of Engineers is on standby with generators en route and being pre-positioned, as well as supplies necessary as the state would request them. FEMA's role during a disaster is to support the governor and his top priorities, and we're here to support like we have been for the last year and a half with COVID and Tropical Storm Isaias. Thank you.
I know that a lot of people are wondering, is Eversource prepared? And they've told us that they have 1,471 restoration crews on standby, 506 tree crews, and 600 damage assessors, and they've requested more than that because of the severity of this. So we do want people to know that our utilities seem to be better prepared this time.
And so now we have some significant impacts, and I'd like to show you some of those significant impacts that are potentially that are possible here in Connecticut, in Rhode Island, and Cape Cod, and the islands, Martha's Vineyard and other islands. The winds will be such that there could be roof damage to sturdy buildings, with some having window and door and garage door failures. That will lead to other sorts of failures as well for those who receive those strong winds in these areas. Also, large trees could be snapped or uprooted. Some roads will be impassable because of trees that have fallen across roadways, or branches, or electrical lines, or poles. And also, power and communication outages are very likely in this storm. But know that those companies have whole divisions that work on restoring that service back to you so you can get that back into operations. I want to show you also from GeoCollaborate the latest National Hurricane Center forecast of the wind probabilities. For those of you who think that the hurricane is going to make a point at one little town and make impact that town the most, these are the wind field probabilities. Take a look at this. So basically the entire state of Connecticut is included in the 90% probability of tropical storm force winds. So if you live in southern Connecticut and you're saying, it's going to hit to the north. No, you're going to get some strong winds as well. And that extends up into Massachusetts with high probability of tropical storm force winds. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to look at the arrival of tropical storm force winds, turn that off. But I want to show you why flooding is going to be so prevalent. Over the last 3 days, we've had a number of rainstorms, and I'm going to also turn off the track just for a moment of Henri, because I want to dive in here to Massachusetts, and I want you to see what it looks like. This area is a contour of 3 to 4, perhaps even 5 inches of rain that has fallen over the last 3 days in this area. So from Worcester down into Connecticut, down all the way to Hartford, the soil is saturated. This whole area has received 3 to 5 inches of rain, and even others that have received just a little bit less. The soil is saturated. So that's why when this hurricane comes in, drops that rain, the rain has nowhere to go but flood. And so that's what that looks like. And I want to turn that off for a second and show you the day 1 through 7. It's called Quantitative Precipitation Forecast from the Weather Prediction Center. Getting a little bit geeky, I know, but this is the estimate for how much rain could fall because of Hurricane Henri. And take a look at this, all the way from Philadelphia on up to through New York City, through Bridgeport and Waterbury, right up to Hartford. We're talking about rain here of potentially 4 inches. So this could be 4 inches of rain, this whole area, maybe let's just say 2 to 4 inches of rain with higher amounts in certain areas. So there could be as much as 8, 9, 10 inches of rain locally that falls because the storm is going to stall somewhat before it shifts track and starts to veer off to the northeast. So this is what it looks like from the standpoint of potential rain. And I'll lift that up just a little bit so you can see it here. So here's Philadelphia, Trenton, Edison, New Jersey. Here's New York City and Bridgeport, Waterbury. Here's Providence, Rhode Island. It looks like the amount of rain there will be right on the verge of being very, very heavy. So you could get 1 to 2 inches of rain an hour, but then it turns quite showery. It turns out that the really wet part of this storm is on the left-hand side of the storm when it hits. The really windy part is on the right-hand side of the storm. So this could change, obviously, but it's just to give you a little bit of a look. And so now I want to talk a little bit about some of the impacts here by state. I put this together earlier, but I refined it just a bit. In Pennsylvania, you could see possible flooding in northeast Pennsylvania or eastern Pennsylvania. There are flood watches in effect. Remember, let's go back here just to the QPF forecast. See that? This is eastern Pennsylvania right in here. And the forecast there is for 2 to 3 inches of rain, perhaps even more in heavier showers. Okay, so in Pennsylvania could be possible flooding. There's going to be supply chain impacts as well to the north. In New Jersey, we're talking about a potential storm surge along the coastline of 1 to 3 feet above normally dry ground. And then in New Jersey and northern parts of New Jersey, we have a flood risk as well, where 4 to 5 inches of rain could fall. New York, significant impacts from New York City onto Long Island, where the storm makes landfall. The eastern edge of Long Island could be hit very, very hard. Power could be out for days there. And also into New York City, once you leave the city and you get out to the north and west, there's going to be flooding impacts there. Connecticut, that's kind of ground zero for where the storm is going to make landfall, whether as a strong tropical storm or a hurricane. And that is going to generate wind-driven waves on the coastline. There are storm surge warnings there, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge potential. And there's also an astronomically high tide because the moon is full. That adds some height to the tide. And then when you get inland in Connecticut, we're talking about wind, lots of wind. Matter of fact, the power companies are estimating perhaps 50% of their customers could be without power when this storm is said and done. There's a lot of crews from more than 13 states are headed up to the Northeast right now so they can muster outside of the damage area and start to restore power very, very quickly. So crews are moving from all over the country to help you in the Northeast, and you haven't even been impacted yet. How do you like that? And so in Connecticut, there's going to be a lot of impacts, and you heard the governor speak during that press conference. And so also for Massachusetts, you're going to see significant wind, flooding damage as well, because there's going to be strong winds, but also a lot of rain falling, particularly in the central and western part of the state. It's going to be a tight gradient as to how much rain you get. But when the storm starts to turn, there's going to be additional rain generated. So hopefully it won't be enough to cause major floods. But when a tropical system comes inland, you really have to plan for the worst. If you live in low-lying areas, plan to get out of there. Go to a neighbor's house if they're at a higher elevation, or just get out of there and go somewhere else, at least for a couple of days. It'll be worth it for you. Rhode Island, you're going to have surge, you're going to have wind, and you're going to have rain. Right now, the quantitative precipitation forecast, I'll just go back to that here just for a second. The QPF in Rhode Island has quite a steep gradient here, where you might get anywhere around a ½ inch to an inch of rain in some places, but then you might get 2 to 3 inches of rain and locally higher amounts in certain areas. Of course, there are watersheds that drain into Rhode Island as well. So Rhode Island, you're going to be under the gun as well. You're going to be on the right-hand side of the storm, which means a lot of wind. So Maine, wind, rain, and possible flooding, particularly on Monday as the storm starts to curve and head out on Monday night into Tuesday. So there are areas where Maine could see some very significant rainfall totals of 2 to 3 inches of rain. And also there's going to be wind. Even if it's a tropical depression, that's going to have winds up to 39 miles per hour. And with a saturated soil, you could have trees down. In Vermont, significant wind, rain, perhaps flooding as well, as the storm really brings some focus in the rain up towards through Vermont. And so again, the quantitative precipitation forecast, I'll show that to you here. This is what it looks like up into western Massachusetts and into Vermont. Look at this. These totals right here are three inches of predicted rain, mostly because of the storm here. And then in New Hampshire, there's going to be 2 to 3 inches of rain as well as the tropical depression winds. So I'm going to call it here for the briefing. That's it. I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications and GeoCollaborate. Thanks for watching this update. Tropical storm force wind should start moving into the coast of Connecticut and Long Island overnight tonight, and tomorrow it's going to go downhill quick. I expect the hurricane will speed up in forward speed. Right now it's moving north at 18 miles per hour, and so once it gets a little bit further north, I wouldn't be surprised to see it moving at 20, 22, 23 miles per hour when it's making landfall. It is a hurricane, Category 1 hurricane. That's not the big issue. The issue is the wind and the rain that's going to be falling. A big flooding hazard is a big potential here. So we'll keep you posted. I may do another update after the 11 o'clock tonight, or I'll do one first thing in the morning after their 5 a.m. Update to give everybody a briefing. This has been a sensitive information sharing environment update. I'm meteorologist Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications and GeoCollaborate. Thanks for watching.